Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of all of us at the locally based, independently owned bookstore, Books and Books in Miami, Florida, and in partnership with Miami Book Fair and our indie bookstore partners all over the US, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a virtual evening with Daniel Silva in conversation with Jamie Gangel, to celebrate the publication of Daniel's newest novel, Portrait of an Unknown Woman, published by our friends at Harper. Daniel Silva is the award-winning #1 New York Times bestselling author of many books. He's best known for his long-running thriller series starring spy and art restorer Gabrielle Allon. Silva's books are critically acclaimed bestsellers around the world and have been translated into more than 30 languages. In conversation with Daniel this evening, we're joined by Jamie Gangel, an award-winning special correspondent at CNN, covering politics and breaking news. Prior to that, she was at NBC News and spent nearly 2 decades as national correspondent for Today, covering a variety of issues from popular culture to hard news. Just a quick reminder that throughout this evening's broadcast, you can post your own questions in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to those right after their conversation. Thank you for supporting independent bookstores everywhere. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Welcome.
We appeared. Christina, thank you so much. And just thank you to everyone across the country. I think we have 21 independent bookstores participating tonight. And as much as Danny would like to be there in person, this is a way to reach everyone across the country. Hi, honey.
Hi, it's been a long time since I've seen you.
Where are you?
Where am I?
Yeah.
Well, let's see if you can guess here. Where am I? Can you see that?
That's St. Louis.
That's St. Louis. That is correct. That you're the special correspondent from CNN. That you're pretty sharp.
So I want to start just, we're going to let readers and our guests tonight ask a lot of questions, but let me just go through a few things. The first is, this is a milestone. You're actually celebrating 2 milestones this year. This is your 25th book, huge milestone. It is also the first time you've been on an airplane since COVID started. It's been about 3 years. What has it been like to be back out?
I kicked off my in-person, I did my first in-person event on Monday evening on the west side of Manhattan. It was so wonderful to
there are people out there. There are real
be
people
in front of a group of people, to get that instant feedback when you say something, to see faces, to connect with people. We've had to take a few precautions, obviously. I mean, the one thing that we're not doing is the signing table, which, by the way, is, to me, the most important part of a book event, because you just get that 1 minute with each person to say hello, to reconnect with people that you've seen previous years. So that's the one thing that we're not doing, but we're trying to make it as safe as possible for everyone who's in the audience, for me to try to get through this long trip without contracting the virus. And it's been wonderful to be back out again. The only problem is that you're not with me. You were supposed to be with me, but you were doing something last night. I think I saw you on television last night. Were you on TV last night?
A little bit.
A little bit?
This is just a little
A
bit.
tiny bit? Okay.
Just a little bit. So let's talk about Portrait of an Unknown Woman. And I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about the book, but no spoilers.
the book is a book that I've been dying to write for a very long time. In the beginning of the book, we see Gabriel transition as hinted in the last book and the prior book. He retires from the office at the beginning of this novel and settles quietly with Chiara and the children in Venice to resume his career as an art restorer. And interestingly enough, he'll be working for his wife, which is something that I happen to know a little something about. His wife, Chiara, is now the director of the general manager of the Tiepolo Restoration Company in Venice, the most prominent restoration firm in Venice. Gabriel is the director of the paintings department, so he reports to his wife. And as often is the case, he gets pulled away from what he's supposed to be doing. In this case, his old friend Julian Isherwood stumbles into Venice with yet another problem, and Gabriel soon finds himself on the hunt for probably the greatest art forger who ever lived. And the wrinkle in the story, the twist, is that in order to find the greatest art forger who ever lived, Gabriel Lalande must become the greatest art forger who ever lived. It is a fast-paced, entertaining, lighter, at times hilarious journey through the dirty side of the art world. And I like to think of it sort of as a cross between the Thomas Crown Affair and the television show Billions. And it deals with a question that a lot of people in the art world don't really like to talk about. And that is exactly how many of those beautiful paintings that you see in auction houses and art galleries and on the walls of museums, how many of those are actually fakes and frauds and completely misattributed?
And how many are?
I'm glad you asked that question. The short answer is, I don't know. And I don't think anyone truly knows. But in doing my research, I stumbled across some interesting numbers. A few years ago, a well-known Swiss authenticator caused a firestorm in the art world when he said that 50% of the paintings circulating through the commercial art market were fakes.
50.
One for one, half of the works circulating through the commercial art world are fakes, or they have been, I would say, deliberately, fraudulently misattributed. And everyone was up in arms. Interestingly enough, it's the exact number that the late Thomas Hovey, who was the legendary director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, it's an exact number that he always stood by. That it's one for one. For every real, genuine painting out there, there is a fake, a fraud, something that has been deliberately misattributed by an art dealer or fraudulently restored by someone. A dear friend of mine is working in this issue. He was a notable museum director, directed several museums. He's working now on a project to use AI, artificial intelligence, to help identify and attribute paintings.
Is this Max? Is this Max?
I'm not going to say who this is.
Okay.
I'm not going to say who this is. And this person told me, in his estimation, in his expert opinion, that it's somewhere in the upper teens to 25%. That's where he thinks it is, in that band right there. It's an extraordinary number. I mean, think if the jewelry market, for example, if 1/4 or 25% of all jewelry was fake gold and fake diamonds, but sold as the real thing. And so there's a problem out there. And this book explores that issue and how that comes to be. I mean, look, there are some very, very fine art dealers in this business, people who just revere art and would never willingly do anything wrong. But there are a lot of dirty art dealers out there who willingly sell forgeries. We had a case in Florida. We're coming tonight from Books and Books in Palm Beach, Worth Avenue, the glitzy avenue in Palm Beach, a big high profile gallery. He was selling fake paintings at huge markups, allegedly, I should say. I mean, he has been arrested. He wasn't going to taking any special steps. He was buying copies online and just selling them to his unsuspecting clients. So he paid $400 or $500 for a painting online and tell his clients that it's a real Basquiat or a real Rothko or something, and get 10 or 12 million for it.
So one of the things, somehow I know something about your research during the years. I have a little, but one of the things that surprised me was you talked about that museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, you talk about Hoving, he actually did an exhibit there where he laid out all of the, fakes, frauds, misattributions.
Yeah, the National Gallery in London did a similar exhibit. We're just open kimono, as we say,
I don't think we're allowed to say that anymore.
We're not.
I don't think.
Was that a microaggression?
I think it was.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But we they laid it out and said, this is where we've been fooled. And they had a multi-room exhibit of all the of forgeries, paintings that they, including a Botticelli, that they thought they had purchased a Botticelli. They did not purchase a Botticelli. It was a much later pastiche, by a follower of Botticelli. In the 1970s, the Met, as we would say, downgraded more than 300 paintings in its European paintings collection. It's something, I'm going to get the number wrong, but it's about 15% of its entire holdings of European paintings. They took it all down, took them and said that they were misattributed.
What would you talk for a minute about what misattributed
Sure.
means? Because there's a something, and then there's a school of something, and then there's the something of something. So
in old master paintings, of course, we have levels of attribution, I'll call it. The clearest attribution would be by a painter, okay, by Titian. If the auction house or the dealer, the seller is not quite sure, he would say attributed to Titian. Of course, all old master painters of any note had large workshop operations. These were commercial enterprises, home decor, church decor, and they had apprentices and journeymen. And so you have an attribution workshop of Titian. Then you broaden out to painters who were in his orbit, but lived in his time. Circle of Titian. Then we get someone who is imitating him later. Okay, a later imitator paints exactly like Titian, or he tries to. He would be painting. The attribution would be manner of Titian. And then you get, even after that, a few years later, maybe even a century after him, you get after Titian. These are artists who are just producing copies. And what happened was, before we got sophisticated in how to determine what is what, a lot of this stuff got all mixed up. And so, when people started acquiring art in the 19th century, when British aristocrats would make they would make the grand tour to Italy. Okay, they would go and they'd bring home a bunch of art. They were getting stuff that was completely, in many cases, completely misattributed. They were also getting just fakes, copies that Italian dealers were foisting on them. Same thing happened when wealthy Americans started collecting. They were getting things that were completely misattributed and just junk that these guys were selling to them. So it got all mixed up over the years. And then those wealthy Americans would, of course, donate their paintings to museums. And so you get something in a Midwestern museum, for example, that says, whatever, Holy Family, Madonna and Child, Titian. Well, it's not a Titian. It's not a Titian. I'm speaking as an example of how something might go wrong. And so it's taken a long time to just sort of demote and downgrade and really figure out what is actually what.
So,
And then sometimes something will get downgraded, and then a scholar will come back and say, wait, not so fast. That actually is a Titian. That is a Botticelli. We were wrong to downgrade it. So there's a wonderful expression or a quote that I came across, that the attributions of paintings should be written in pencil because they change.
Huh.
And they change because of who's examining them, with what technical tools and what they can bring to it. So paintings sort of come in and out. And obviously, if you're the owner of a painting like that, the value of your painting can go up wildly, or it can be worth nothing. I mean, next to nothing, with a change of attribution.
So let's get back to Gabriel Alon's role in all of this. Gabriel Alon is pretty darn good at spotting fakes.
Well, we have seen Gabriel be used as an authenticator before. Julian uses Gabriel frequently because he, as he likes to say, he's been around paintings for 100 years. Art restorers, because they are really in a painting. I mean, they are right there, nose to nose with it. They know these paintings a lot better than many art historians and connoisseurs. And then many experts like Gabriel do have a sixth sense. They're known as fake busters. That when they see something that's wrong, they just know it instantly. They just know it instantly. Francis O'Connor, the late Francis O'Connor, the expert in Jackson Pollock. Obviously, Pollock is someone who has been forged a lot, probably being forged right now. Someone right now is out there forging a Pollock and getting ready to put it on the market. He said that he could tell in 1 second whether it was real or not, and that there are people who just possess that ability, and Gabriel is one of them.
One of the other things about this book that I love is not only that it's funny, but you bring back a lot of your older characters. It is a grand ensemble. I mean, Oliver Dimbleby is back. Don Orsatti is back. We go back to Corsica. The goat is back, a fan favorite. The goat is back. Gabriel seems to be in a new place in his life, and his children are a little older, old enough so that they have some star turns.
Yeah, you'll see in chapter 2, there's a paragraph or two where I make the turn with Gabriel. And he's the same character, but I just restored him a little bit. I retouched him a tiny bit in for this final lap of his life and the series. And I love this version of Gabriel. This is where I always wanted the series to end up. Many of the books have had art components to them, or have begun in the art world, and then they've branched off elsewhere. This one begins in the art world, and for the most part stays in the art world. And one of the things that was, I didn't want to say struggled with, but when Gabriel was the director of the office and he's jetting around the world doing, global operations, it was hard for me to bring slow the books down enough for him to get some meaningful time with his children. And I was able at the beginning of this novel to have a couple of really nice scenes with these amazing children of his. And look, I love writing female characters. The series is populated with really remarkable women, and Gabriel's daughter Irene is the newest addition to that, and she is a handful. She is she looks exactly like Gabriel's mother and has all of Kiara's mannerisms. So she's when he looks at his daughter, he sees the two most important women in his life, and she's just a special child, and they have a great relationship. And she has a star turn in this book. Yeah.
Can you give us one example of Irene who appears to call out her father at anything past her?
An example of it, no spoilers, but she just does have she has a little bit of second sight to her. She's a little bit of a magical character, always has been. And it's because she looks so startlingly like every time he looks at this child, he sees his mother looking back at him. So she comes to the table sort of imbued with some magic. And she does have a little touch of magic to her.
25 books.
Yeah.
Does it get easier with time or harder with time?
I would say harder in one respect, in that I took a vow that I was not going to die at the typewriter, as it were. And while I plan to write for many more years, there is a limit out there. So it's harder for me to settle on a book. And I want every sentence, every paragraph, every scene, I'm very picky about, because these are how my work is going to be measured. And so some writers are guilty, I think, late in their career of I don't want to say phoning it in, but they're not necessarily writing at their best. And I just don't ever want that to happen with me. I'm just going to give every ounce that I have into every book.
Is it fair to say, panic is the wrong word, but you hold yourself to a very high standard? You have an expression about whether a particular book is a worthy entry.
Worthy addition to the series. I mean, look, Gabriel Allon series has some real high points to it. There's some books in the series, whether it is the Confessor and the Death in Vienna and the Messenger, the English Girl, and the Black Widow. These are up there, I think, in books that are will be remembered as some of the better books in the genre. And I want every book to live up to that, even if it's a little bit of I don't want to say departure, but a little bit of different style. I mean, this is slightly different in tone than previous books, but I wanted there to be absolutely no decrease in the perceived quality of it.
Let's talk a little bit about process. Rumor has it that your wife built a very large, beautiful desk in your office, and you have a lovely computer. Where do you work?
I work in longhand, in pencil, and I prefer to write on the floor. I prefer to write lying on my stomach on the floor. Odd, you say? Perhaps. For those of you keeping score at home, you can Google Muriel Spark, the author of Miss Jean Brodie. You'll see it. The first photograph that'll come up, I think, is this great photograph of young Muriel Spark lying on the floor with her notebooks. One of my favorite pictures of her, as one of my favorite writers. I'm not alone in terms of there are some of us that still write in longhand. I know Nelson DeMille writes in longhand. I know that Ann Tyler has a habit of she'll write her first draft on computer, but she'll do the revisions and the edit, the second draft. She will write the book out in longhand. Why does she do that? Because it slows her down. and it forces her to write the sentences out. And it exposes where if they get a little discursive or a little something that doesn't quite measure up, or something that's a little a false note, that writing in longhand exposes it. That it's just different than it is writing at the computer. I also get fiddleitis.
What is fiddleitis?
I can sit there at the computer and go click, click, click. It's very easy to make revisions, go back and tick, 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 tick. And there's just something about slowing the pace down in longhand that I find that I can write better, more polished, complete copy. And it's amazing when I finish, I'll get like a stack like this, and boy, I can really go back through it and find page after page after page of copy that just ends up in the book without a single revision to it.
So you write a book a year, which means you really only have 6 months, because you have to go through copy editing and publishing and touring. So I know it starts around Labor Day, and you hand in around April 1st.
I hand in on April 1st.
On April 1st. You don't outline.
No.
So will you describe what that 6 months emotionally, what is that 6 months like, and sort of how much time are you writing, how many days a week?
Well, I work 7 days a week, always. I write every day, always, except when I'm out here, obviously. I try to not overdo it early. If a book is like this, I have maybe about that much that I can see. I get to work as quickly as possible. I cannot bring it to life on notepads or note cards. I can't outline it. Sometimes I just really don't have a clear idea of where I'm going with the story. But as soon as I feel comfortable, I start writing and bring it to life. I try not to overdo it in September and October. By November 1st, I'm starting to get a little choky feel. And then December 1st is, but January 1st is utter deadline panic. And so I will start working, 10 hours a day, sitting there, 12 hours a day, in February. I'm not a big sleeper. I've never been a big sleeper. When I'm working on a book, 3 hours a night is, maybe 4 hours on a good night. That's what I sleep. I get up, have a quick look at the papers, get dressed, get to work. Mornings are really, really, really important to me. The computer that I write on is not attached to the internet, so no notifications are banging, nothing. I keep a separate computer for any internet searches. I do not check email. I keep the phone set so that Jamie is the only person that can call me. I don't take calls. I don't schedule calls. I don't do anything until late in the afternoon.
So we just have a couple more minutes before we're going to open it up to the people who have the really, really smart questions. So I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round with you. I haven't done this.
I'm not capable of lightning round.
First of all, can you just show everyone, you usually are very formally dressed on book tour, but I got some texts about the event last night and your footwear. Could we all please see your footwear?
Well, as an explanation for why I'm not wearing wool trousers and a formal woolen blazer, it's about 3,000 degrees in the center of the country right now. I know that Book Passage is with us tonight. Boy, I wish we were in San Francisco, although it's warm there too. So I did. You really wanted? You're going to make me
show me the shoes, and then I have 3 final questions, really quick. Let's see the shoes.
How to do this, but
oh my gosh, what are those?
They're Vans Old Schools that I wore last night.
You have cute little socks in there with them?
I do have cute little socks on. Yeah, cotton. No stretchy, dress socks. It's just too hot. look, the country's on fire. It was 104 degrees in London. We went straight from, predictions of a changing climate to a climate emergency. It happened in about 3 years that the climate has really changed, and not for the better.
It's all so that you can wear Vans. I just want to understand the climate.
I'm going to be wearing Arab desert clothing soon, because it is really hot. It is really hot.
Okay, really fast. All-time favorite movie?
All-time favorite movie? Casablanca.
Casablanca. All-time favorite book, or if you have to pick 3, you can pick 3.
I mean,
Come on, we're running out of time.
1984. 1984.
1984.
Underrated as a thriller, and anyone who has read any of my books knows that I'm adore Fitzgerald, and there are clear allusions to Fitzgerald in this book. One of the interesting things about this novel is that a great deal of it takes place in New York. Gabriel makes 2 trips to New York, 3 trips to the tri-state area in the course of this novel, and spends some time out on Long Island.
Favorite artist? Gabriel is a restorer. Favorite artist?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I could rattle off several old master artists. I love Impressionism. And I'm crazy about American, the ABEX movement. I love Pollock and Rothko and de Kooning and all those painters.
Okay.
I'm not going to give you one artist.
Last question from me. If you could have, this is sort of like Desert Island Disc, but it's a dinner party. If you could have a dinner party and invite anyone you wanted to invite, who would you have at the dinner party?
Oh boy. Well, I would love George Orwell to be there. Poor George. I really want to write a book or do a movie about the writing of 1984. He's dying of tuberculosis. He's holed up in a cottage in Scotland. It'd just be a great story. So I'd like to have poor George or Eric Blair there. 2 writers that I just love, and I love the legendary stories about them. I would love to have Gore Vidal and Norman Mailer at dinner. That would be great. The 2 of them had a great literary feud. It included one night at a New York cocktail party. They got into an argument, and Norman Mailer decked Gore Vidal, and Gore Vidal's laying on the floor with his lip bleeding, and said famously, "Once again, Mr. Mailer, words fail you." I'd love to have them at dinner. I think it'd be great to have Beethoven at dinner. He's deaf, so that would make it a little interesting. Mozart would be a great dinner companion. He loved the nightlife, so that'd be a good dinner table. And you, of course.
Thank you. With that, I think we should turn it over. Christina, can you come back and help us? Because I see that there are questions in the Q&A slot, but it's hard for me to read them. So you take it from here.
Here I am. Thank you. Gore Vidal and Norman Mailer. I love that. Okay. So we have a lot of questions. Okay, let's start with a question from Brett. What was the inspiration for the goat?
The goat. It's going to be on my literary tombstone, that darn animal. He would just appeared in the second book of the series, and that every time Christopher had to get to his villa on Corsica, this darn goat blocked his path. And in my manuscript, I wrote this scene. And look, I grew up in half of my life in Michigan and half in Central California. I have experience with farm animals. Okay, this goat is I guess he probably came out of my childhood. And I had this line in the manuscript: "The goat detested the Englishman." I had to fight so long to keep that line in the book, because the copy editor said that goat cannot detest him. You can't give him these qualities. I said, you're wrong. So that's where he appeared. And then when I brought Christopher back into the series with a book called The English Girl, the goat was still there. And so he would be, at this point, I think, the longest lived domestic goat in history. He's a great character, not because he himself is such a great character, but what it allows me to do with the characters who confront this beast. There is a scene in the epilogal section of the book, late in the book, that is one of my favorite things I've ever written, and the goat is the centerpiece for that.
Thank you. From Carol, did you have the ending in mind when you started writing?
This one, definitely, because I guess this novel falls into the category of the sort of the caper heist story, and caper heist stories, of course, always have to have a killer twist at the end. Without giving too much away, obviously the twist in this one involves the real identity of this forger who is putting these unbelievable, these masterpieces out on the marketplace. And so that the identity is held to the very last chapter of the novel, almost the darn last page. So I knew how it was going to end. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to get there, but I did know how this one's going to end.
Thank you. From Mickey, how did Daniel originally become interested in art restoring Israeli intelligence and all the wonderful worlds he places us in?
Oh boy, that's a broad question. I was a big reader as a child. I just, you probably don't remember The World at War, that television program on public television back in the 70s. I watched that program religiously on KQED in San Francisco, and just really became interested in history, in World War II, and the Holocaust, and the history of the Middle East, and the history of Israel. And Gabriel sort of stands at the crossroads of a lot of things that I'm interested in, including art. I'm just passionate about art. My mother took me to a Van Gogh exhibit when it came to the United States in the 70s. And I went to the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco to see this, and I was hooked from the beginning. I'm crazy about art. And so, the restoration aspect to Gabriel's character was a little bit of serendipity. While I was creating the character, I just happened to have dinner with a dear friend of mine who is one of the world's finest art restorers. I mean, truly. And I was like, oh, hold on a minute. Wouldn't this be interesting if this was if Gabriel's cover job? And I pulled him aside at dinner, and I said, I have this crazy idea. I'd like to turn an Israeli assassin into an Italian art restorer. Can you help me do that? He said, absolutely. And so I spent the next few days in the laboratory at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, studying restoration. I learned everything I could about the craft of restoration. It seemed to me that it had a great deal in common with the craft of counterterrorism and assassination. I blended the two together, and Gabriel Lon was born. And look, restoration, not only art restoration, but the concept of restoration is critical to the series. I mean, the plot of every book revolves around restoration in some way, and not just art. Restoration of righting historical wrongs, fixing people, fixing situations. Gabriel's just one of those people. He can fix a painting. He can make an old car run again. He's very special in that regard.
Thank you. From Barbara, do you think the Salvadore Mundi is an original Da Vinci, or do you think it falls within that 50% rule that it could be a potential forgery? Were you at all inspired by the incredible story of provenance and ultimate sale of the Mundi for $580 million?
I'm going to be careful about how I speak about the painting. So no, it's not a forgery. I guess I put my feelings about the painting in a book called The New Girl, because it's actually in the book. And so Gabriel said of the painting that it's possible that a very small portion of it was a Leonardo a long time ago. So that's where I would guess I would come down on it. I am troubled by the fact that on the panel itself, there's a huge knot. It seems, I find it hard to believe that Leonardo would put it on a painting, a piece of wood that's so flawed. If you were able to see what the picture really looks like, and a friend of mine was able to see it when it was taken down, okay, when all the varnish was taken off and all of the work that previous restorers had done over the centuries was taken down. If you could really see what it looks like, it's a wreck. And so it was restored by the greatest restorer in the world. She is remarkable. So much of what you see is her work. And so I guess I would categorize the painting not as dubiously restored or fraudulently restored, but as it's over restored. It looks perfect. I actually had a chance to see it before Sotheby's got it and turned it into this global sensation. I can't say where I saw it, but I was face to face with it in a vault. And when the light came on and it hit the painting, it is one of those arresting images. You just sort of go, whoa. And it does look like Leonardo's work. It's an odd painting, but still it grabs you. But I would say of the painting that it's definitely over restored. And perhaps it would have been nicer if she had maybe had a little bit of a lighter touch to it. It might stay a Leonardo. I don't think that MBS is ever going to let anyone lay their hands on it and study it further. But I'm a little dubious about the attribution.
Thank you. From Linda, I am amazed that your books anticipate future events like the oligarchs in The Cellist. How does that happen?
When you write international thrillers involving world events, current events, the worst thing that could happen to you is that your book feels dated, that events have passed you by. And so before I start a book, I always try to imagine, what is the world going to look like a year from now when this work is published? I mean, I'm compelled to, but I do approach my work a bit like an intelligence analyst. I mean, an intelligence analyst doesn't want to tell his customer, his prime minister, his president, what's happening today. He needs to tell his customers what's going to happen, what he thinks is going to happen. And I think that I'm sort of under the same obligation. I just happen to have been fortuitous in that I was pretty good at it. I did get overtaken by some events. In the Black Widow, for example, I just knew, talking to people in the counterterrorism business, that ISIS was going to develop an international terrorist network, that Europe and France was going to be hit by ISIS very, very hard. I just knew it was going to happen. I started writing the book, that book really just predicted everything that happened, including, I used Molenbeek in Belgium as a setting. The New Girl sort of did get overtaken by events, and I did have to, after the killing of Khashoggi, I had to throw out a large portion of that book and rewrite it and recraft it hastily, and so it ended up being sort of a roman à clef about the Khashoggi affair. So sometimes I sort of predict too well what's going to be happening, and I get caught as a result.
We have a couple of people who would like to know if Michael Osborne is ever returning in a novel.
You know what? That's one I feel really badly about. I really thought for a while that I was going to get 2 series going, so that I would have the Gabriel series and the Michael series. And there was connective tissue between the two. Adrian Carter of the CIA being the most obvious connective tissue. And I thought that it would be nice to have those 2 series going. And Gabriel was just really working, and I was enjoying writing him. And Michael just got a little too far removed, and too many years went by. And I let it go. And I think it would be hard to bring him back. I mean, if I were to start another series or write some books that are that feature another character, I do think it would probably be Christopher Keller and MI6 rather than going back to Michael.
Thank you. Someone would like to know, since you know so much about art, were you ever a painter?
I would not call myself a painter, but I did always take art classes in high school and even in college, drawing and painting. I'm terrible, but I'm crazy about art.
And then lots of people that would like to know, will there be a movie or a series from the books? And if so,
I
who
had
would play Gabriel?
I thought I had the deal a couple of years ago with MGM Television. A little scandal erupted in Hollywood not long after I signed the deal. This sort of threw the industry into turmoil. We fell behind on our schedule. The rights reverted back to me. My Hollywood agent, who is my wife, is actually talking to some people right now. I can't say who they are. I can say that one of them is one of my favorite screenwriters. And I'm ever hopeful. But look, this is sensitive material. It's controversial material. Gabriel's, very existence is controversial in some quarters. So, I have to have some guarantees, some very specific guarantees in my contract. And if I can't get a deal that I'm absolutely comfortable that something good is going to be made, I am absolutely happy to leave him on the page and let him live in that universe alone.
Thank you. We'll do 2 more. One from Doug. What element of your novels has surprised you the most in terms of popularity amongst your readers?
The whole thing. I mean, look, Gabriel was never supposed to be a continuing character. He was supposed to appear in one book and one book only. I had to be convinced to write a second Gabriel Long book. I was concerned that it would never work as a mass market product, that an Israeli hero could never truly work globally, for all the reasons I spoke about a moment ago. And so I had an idea for this. The second book involved Nazi art looting during the Second World War and the conduct of the Swiss government and the Swiss banks. I plugged Gabriel into that setting, introduced a character named Anna Rolf, a Swiss violinist who makes an appearance in this novel. And my goodness, it sold more than the previous book. It seems crazy to think now that Confessor is one of my most popular books. It's on a couple of lists of the greatest thrillers of all time. When I first drew up the notes for The Confessor, Gabriel was not in that book. My editor said he must be in that book. I put him in that book. And that's the point where he became a series. The notion that I never dared to imagine that he might be a #1 New York Times bestselling character. So that is really the biggest surprise. The entire thing is a surprise to me.
Thank you. From Paula. Daniel, I love your books and I didn't realize you knew so much about art forgeries. Do you also have an opinion on theft? I would love in my lifetime to see the storm on the Sea of Galilee. Do you think it will ever be found?
You know, I hate to say this out loud, but I'll go ahead and say it. I am planning to do a novel about that theft. And I guess to answer the question truthfully, I don't think it's ever going to be found. And I think that, there's a lot of BS about art theft, that people think that collectors don't buy stolen art, and there isn't a market for stolen art, and that stolen art gets circulated among criminals. I think that's nonsense. My character Maurice Durand is an art thief and a broker in stolen art. He's obviously a little bit of a superheated character, but there is a huge market for stolen art. I don't know where those paintings are from the Gardner heist. The fact that they've been gone for so long would say to me that someone's got them, someone's keeping them, or they might have been lost or destroyed in some way. I am really interested in art theft. Art theft is going to play a role in future books. And I've been crazy about art forgery for a long time. And I think people are going to learn a lot about art forgery by reading this book. And they're going to see Gabriel Allon forge some paintings. I mean, a restorer of his talent would be if he were to break bad, I mean, he would be lethal with the paintbrush in his hand. He could fool anybody. I'll give one little spoiler. He's just screwing around in his studio, and he paints two perfect Modiglianis in a matter of hours. And if he were to take those onto the market, he could make tens of millions of dollars doing it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So you're both amazing. We love your books so much. We love carrying them. We love selling them. We're so grateful for your time, for being with us tonight. Can't thank you enough. Thank you to everyone watching, to our partner bookstores, and hopefully we will see you the next time in person.
Hopefully. Guys, everyone out there, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And again, maybe, next year in person, we hope.
Thank you both. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you, Christina. Bye.
Bye.